So good evening, everyone. I'm Pam Thomas, the coordinator for the Northern Virginia and DC chapter of CHAD, and I want to welcome you to our April lecture tonight, How to Survive and Thrive on Your Family Vacation, presented by Cheryl Gedzelman and Dr. Teri Bullis. The mission of our chapter aligns with the mission of CHAD National to improve the lives of children and adults who are affected with ADHD. Our chapter is a volunteer organization of trained professionals who offer support in a number of ways. We offer free monthly lecture series on the second Tuesday evening of most months, offer support groups for parents and adults, host an annual ADHD resource fair in the month of October to highlight ADHD Awareness Month, and offer individual support through email inquiries. Now to introduce our speakers tonight. Cheryl Gedzelman is the president of Tutoring for Success, a company that offers tutoring, academic coaching, and test prep, both in person and online. She's also the mom of 2 daughters and a lover of vacations. Dr. Teri Bullis is a licensed psychologist providing behavior therapy to kids and families grappling with challenging behavior related to diagnosis such as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, and anxiety disorders, as well as difficulties stemming from raising strong-willed, independently minded children who have their own ideas about what makes a great vacation. Additionally, Teri and Cheryl are both members of this CHAD board, and they both suggested this timely topic and want to share their tips and tricks for planning a successful family vacation. Their lectures presented from the expert perspective of a behavior specialist who is also the parent of 2 neurotypical children, which is Teri, and from the more personal but equally important perspective of another parent of 2 children, one whom had a more neurodiverse developmental pathway, Cheryl. So Teri and Cheryl, thank you so much for providing this great lecture tonight, and we look forward to hearing all about the tips and tricks for the vacation. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Pam, for that introduction. I'm Teri, and let me just show you our pictures so you'll know who's who. I'm Dr. Teri Bullis, and I will try to include some lovely anecdotes from vacations. I've taken a few with my kids, including my relatively neurotypical daughter, my son, who is 3.5 years older than her, and even our foster daughter, who was a couple of years older than him. That was a fun trip out west on a road trip. We've also been to Disney World a couple of times, and I'll be sharing some of those experiences, but mainly my job tonight is to talk about the behavior stuff. So I'll get into that in some real detail, really learning or sharing with you some ways that we can apply what we know about behavior theory to making a vacation a survivable and even wonderful experience. But first, we're going to start with Cheryl. I'm going to share our objectives. Our objectives here are to be able to really do some thinking about how to plan activities and structure to maximize joy and minimize stress in your vacation, but to recognize also when and how you might want to change the plan, because that's equally important. And then I'll come in after Cheryl's covered those 2 sort of key points to talk a little bit about how you might want to switch things up in order to clarify rules, consequences that are going to really set the tone or set kids up for success while you're on the road or on vacation, and also how to implement a reward system on the go to keep behaviors positive, in case you're interested in that more sort of concrete level. But I'll talk about different levels when we get there. So we're going to start first with Cheryl. Cheryl's had some great vacations, and fortunately, she can remember all of the things that she had to do to make those successful. So Cheryl, if you wouldn't mind, let's go.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to talk about some of my vacations. I actually live for my next vacation. I'm a big lover of vacations. And I'm already planning my vacation for May of 2025, since the ones in 2024 are already mostly planned, not completely. But when I had two little kids, maybe ages 4 and 6, or maybe 5 and 7, whatever they were, we decided we were ready to take a 1-week vacation with them. And the first thing I thought of was how hard my kids were. And I wanted to not be exhausted the whole time. So my first plan was to have a vacation from our vacation. And what that meant is our first vacation was 2 parts. For a few days, we went to Williamsburg, which was fun for the kids and for us. And the second part, we went to Wintergreen, which is, I don't know if you've ever been there. It's in Virginia, and it's a planned mountainous area, and it has a camp for the kids. So every day we could drop them off at the camp and we could go hiking. And that was our vacation from the vacation. So I planned this very well, and it mostly went pretty well. But we forgot to pack the apple juice. And what that meant was, because one of my daughters was addicted to apple juice, it meant that the walk from the car to the visitor center at Williamsburg really seemed like it was about 10 years, because it was hot and she was complaining that she needed to have apple juice, and we hadn't thought to pack it. And luckily the visitor center had plenty of apple juice, little containers just like this, which I never saw at any other visitor center. So somebody was on our side and we got past that one. So 2 things that we did that went really well is we plugged in separation time from the kids at the end of the day so we could regroup. And by getting a hotel room that was actually 2 hotel rooms with an adjoining door. And that was, the kids loved having their own room, but they were right there. So it was really a fun way to get some separation time. And then when we went to Wintergreen, we also had a house with a few rooms, but we had family time, and that's where we all bonded. And we founded this golf monopoly edition, which was hysterical because none of us play golf, but we love Monopoly. And it was the first time our kids played Monopoly. And then we continued playing Monopoly for years to come, but we got things more up our alley, like Dog Monopoly and New York City Monopoly.
Awesome.
This is another trip we went on when the kids were in middle school to San Francisco. So we have 2 kids, one who is totally into exercise and the other who can't walk very far without getting tired. So this presented some problems that we did not plan very well. For one thing, we didn't know that the Golden Gate Bridge would be so foggy that you wouldn't be able to see a single thing in front of you. And we also didn't know how long it was, which is very. And we didn't realize we would have to walk to get there in the first place. And my little daughter just kept saying, I'm running out of charge. I'm running out of charge. And she would just stop. And we're like, oh no, what are we going to do now? Like, keep pushing her along. And so we went to Ghirardelli Square. Well, I'll talk about that later. But anyway, my older daughter wanted to walk across the entire bridge in the fog. And we couldn't possibly do it. The younger one would not make it. So there was tantrum time, and the rest of that day was a little bit stressful. But we did learn something about planning.
Did your older daughter get to walk across the bridge? What happened?
She did not get to walk across the bridge. She went, for a while we said, because the other one wouldn't walk anymore. So the older daughter said, well, I'm going. And she left, and we couldn't see a thing because of the fog. So we just hoped for the best. I mean, she was in middle school. We hoped that she would know enough to come back, and she did, and we found her. But if we had thought the night before, like, we should really see how much walking is involved, how long this bridge is, and really plan it better. So we learned about planning from this.
Oh.
Okay, so something for everyone. I know people who plan vacations that are very kid-friendly, like they go to amusement parks, they go to water parks, and what are the parents doing? The parents are walking around, looking at their kids, taking pictures, but are the parents having a really fun vacation? Maybe not. And other people go on vacations that are full of sightseeing, which kids do not typically like sightseeing so much. Looking at cute towns, going to museums, that's not super a kid thing. So what I recommend is, and what I try and do for our vacations, is find vacations that include something for everyone. And for example, a resort or a cruise are set up exactly to please everybody, everybody's needs, everybody's wants, and it's super easy for parents because there's food and everything. Sometimes children have special interests, so if you can stick them in, like what they're interested in, and make it as part of the trip, then they'll be looking forward to that, and that will be their day and their interest. Make sure to plan the itinerary in advance before you even go on vacation, or at least the night before, and review it with the children. Make sure everybody knows what to expect. Now, this is especially true for kids who are neurodivergent, for kids who require a lot of structure in their day at home. And vacation is the opposite of that, because typically vacations have much less structure than being at home. So if they know what to expect, it's so much easier. And you can even, this is recommended from one of our students, you can show children pictures of what you're going to see and pictures of where you're going to stay, and talk about who is going to sleep where and what it's going to be like. And you may even want to switch bedrooms. If one of them is bigger than the other, switch halfway through so they each get the bigger one. And there's all kinds of ways that kids could be involved and to know what to expect.
I just want to throw in there that it occurs to me as you're talking, Cheryl, that this would be a particularly helpful thing for kids who have anxiety. And as we know, anxiety tends to co-occur at a pretty high rate with ADHD. So if you have a kiddo with ADHD, chances are fairly high that that kiddo might also suffer from anxiety. And kids who are anxious really benefit from knowing ahead of time what things are going to look like and how things are going to be different and what the expectations are, so that they know what to expect, and that can reduce their anxiety about things.
And a lot of kids have anxiety, not just with ADHD, also kids who are on the spectrum, or kids who just need a lot of structure. And I forgot to mention the picture. We did not put our kids in jail. That's at Alcatraz, and that was super fun.
Awesome. Well, the door is open, so
Yes.
locked in there.
Okay, this is the other half of the San Francisco trip. On the way to the Golden Gate Bridge, when my daughter kept running out of charge and not wanting to walk anymore, we stopped at a plaza for Ghirardelli's, which was great chocolate, yummy. And then we saw this adorable tea shop in the same plaza. And that's when it was time. We realized we need downtime. We need to add this to our plan. So we went in the tea shop, and it was one of the best memories of the vacation. It had these cute quotes all over the tea shop, and we just talked about it. We sat there for like an hour, and my daughter's favorite quote was, "Bread and water can so easily be toast and tea."
I love the accent, Cheryl. Nicely done.
Well, hers is better. During vacation. All right, you already talked about the itinerary. You did a lot of planning in advance, but the night before is another, and the day of is another time to go over the itinerary, make sure everybody knows what's happening, see if you want to make any little adjustments. And of course, while you're there, you may want to make adjustments too. You should always have a backup plan. You may have some event you're planning to do that you're not really sure how it's going to go. If it doesn't go so great, have a backup substitution plan. And always bring snacks, healthy snacks. That's what I learned in my first vacation. Always bring drinks. Never assume there's going to be food anywhere. And I still do that to this day. Wherever I go, I always have snacks. I always have a water bottle. So
sort of like kindergarten, right?
Excuse me, Teri?
If you pretend you're in kindergarten, just like proceed like that. Go over the schedule, have snacks, make sure the activities are fun, right?
Maybe some of you heard about the book, Everything I Wanted to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, all the important things. And it's true. You do learn the most important things there. And use incentives. And Teri's going to talk much more about incentives. Maybe we'll do a little sightseeing to please mom and dad, go to a museum. And then we're going to go to the pool. That's going to be super fun for the kids. So there's something for everyone. It's nice to have the incentives later to make the behavior better earlier.
And we'll talk how you can do that more specifically and more generally later on.
Special needs. A lot of our kids have special needs. One of them that's more typical is structure. One of them is to be eating on a frequent basis. And in my family, one of them was to have a lot of exercise in the schedule and to have vegan restaurants. Vegan restaurants in those days were not so friendly, not so easy to find as they are now, and at least have a vegan option. Because my daughter decided to be a vegan when she was 14, which was like in 2016. No, 2012. Anyway, it was a while ago. So anyway,
Back
so
before
that's what we need.
vegan was popular, right?
Before it was popular, and we had the first trip to San Francisco, easy to find vegan restaurants. Arizona, not so much. So we had to put these things in the schedule, and everybody didn't have to do everything together all the time. So at the Grand Canyon, my older daughter and I were both runners. We left, and the younger daughter likes to sleep in. So older daughter and I went early in the morning to the Grand Canyon, and we were running on the rim of the Grand Canyon. And it was like one of the best experiences I ever had. It's not something I ever would have chosen on my own, but that was her thing, what she wanted to do. And it was so beautiful. It was so peaceful. It was cool before the heat wave came out. And I just had a great time, except for being terrified that she was going to fall in because she was such a fast runner. But she didn't fall in, so big success.
So all was good. One of the things that I've noticed from a lot of my clients who have kids who have ADHD is that they've noticed they need to get some really good intense exercise into their kids' schedules every day, and otherwise the kid is miserable. So, that applies on vacation as well as, just the humdrum of everyday life, right? It sounds like you had one of those, Cheryl.
Yes, it was a passion.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, no matter how much planning you do, there is still a meltdown. And if you have meltdowns at home in your regular life, chances are you might have one on vacation also. This does not mean your vacation is ruined. It does not mean you didn't plan well enough. It just means this is part of life. This is how kids are. And you just need to take a deep breath, get through it like you do at home, and take a break, and then move on to the next part of your vacation. And sure, you can learn a lesson maybe. Oh, I know what caused this tantrum. I forgot to do this, or we didn't take enough breaks during the day, or she didn't get enough exercise or enough food or whatever. You can figure that out later. But mainly in our experience, we could not completely prevent meltdowns and tantrums. They happen maybe at least once per vacation, but it was just I've talked to so many parents, they all say the same thing, that vacations, and also the kids fight a lot, all kinds of stuff happens, but you have your family bonding time, and you get through it, and you move on, and you don't dwell on the bad things, you dwell on the good things.
Hear, hear.
We really like to keep the kids involved in not only the planning, but during the vacation, taking photos, making videos. Our kids made the most adorable video when we were in Montreal of every aspect of the trip. And they were the narrators, and we kept zooming from place to place, and it was so cute, and we still have it to watch. Some people, another student of ours told us that they like to do scrapbooking, and maybe that's an old-fashioned thing, but it's still a great activity. And this way, if every person in the family writes down in the scrapbook their favorite part of the day, and then you can put some pictures in, and then that keeps the memories of the trip. And it also practices some writing skills while you're on the way. And the scrapbooking is really fun and something you could look at much later. And then in the future, you can talk about past vacations, you can watch the videos, you can look at the scrapbooks, look at the photo albums, and then family jokes. We always had family jokes like the tea shop, but we had others too, and they're fun to bring up after the vacation. So vacations are just such a great time for families to bond, because if you're like most families in Northern Virginia or Maryland or DC, or any major metropolitan area, you're going from thing to thing all day, and your kids have lots of activities, and everybody is so busy. So many families don't even have time for a family meal, except for a couple of times a week, hopefully. But on vacation, you're really stuck together, which may cause more fighting, but it's also an opportunity to just get to know each other better, to do things together. You don't even have to talk a lot. You could just do things and be together. And I think there's nothing like a vacation. I think it just enhances life so much. I know some people don't like vacations, they don't like change, but for people who do like vacations, there's so much you could do to make your vacations even more fun. And there was one thing I wanted to add, which I forgot to talk about earlier, and Teri's going to mention it, is one way we pass the time in the car is recorded books. And that's something we did a lot because our family is in New York, and when we drove back and forth to New York like 4 times a year. And so we played card games, but we also listened to recorded books. And our favorite were books by Judy Blume and Henry Winkler. They wrote some really funny books that everybody could relate to. And I thought my husband and I enjoyed them just as much as the kids. And then before you know it, you're there. So Teri will be mentioning other activities and games to keep your kids busy. So that's my part. And Teri's going to talk to you more about improving behaviors to make your vacations even better.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. So as people might know, and lots of people probably don't know, I am a behavior therapist. And what that means is that I work primarily with parents, but also with kids sometimes, on how to change behavior. And behaviors happen. Behaviors happen with typically developing kids, and behaviors happen a lot with kids who have ADHD and kids who have autism or anxiety, or even just a really strong personality. So the things that I'm going to talk about are how to apply an understanding of behavior to your vacation planning so that you can have a great vacation. So here we go. First off, of course, if we're talking about behavior, we have to talk about rewards. And so the very foundation of behavior theory is that people will do the things that they're rewarded for, and then they won't do things that they get negative consequences for. So rewards can take a variety of different forms. It can be attention, and parental attention is a powerful motivator. Now that's important to remember, not just in terms of your positive attention, but also your negative attention can unfortunately be motivating sometimes. So we want to figure out how to use your attention for good and to make this vacation fun, and not to have it encourage negative behaviors accidentally. Another way that we can improve behavior by providing a form of reward is your behavior specific praise. So this is sort of a form of attention, right? It's praising your child for something, but in order to be, you've probably heard that a lot, just dole out the praise is really important. And then you've probably also heard people say, blanket praise is not so good. It actually doesn't help. You should let your children find their own way. And actually, both of those statements are kind of true. But the reality is the best form of praise, and by the way, praise is good. Let's do that. Let's praise our children. That is important. But let's be really specific about it. When we praise them, let's say, thank you for blah, 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 whatever it was that they did, and then tell them what kind of quality they were exhibiting when they engaged in that behavior. So thank you for sharing your drink with your brother. That was really kind of you, right? So the child then says, oh, I am kind, and I was kind to my brother. And if your child sees him or herself that way, they are going to be more likely to behave that way in the future. So behavior-specific praise, the research is really, really clear that that is one of the very most effective things that you can do to improve positive behavior. So if you don't want to do anything any more structured, and you just want to change one thing on vacation to make it better, try some behavior-specific praise, because it'll work. It's not going to fix everything, though. There are some other things we can do. So another one of the things we can do is privileges. So Cheryl talked a little bit about that, like, scheduling a fun activity after an activity that maybe your children aren't so interested in. That's a privilege that can be used as an incentive. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to make that even more powerful by making your privilege contingent upon the positive behavior. So that'll be coming up. You can also offer tangible rewards if you want to. You can be behaviorally minded and not necessarily offer tangible rewards. You know, money, toys, sweet treats. Some people don't feel comfortable giving their child those things as motivators. It doesn't feel good to them. It feels like bribing. Bribing, by the way, is something that you do when you're trying to convince somebody to do something illegal or unethical. And trying to get your children to get along with each other is not illegal or unethical. I prefer saying that we are offering incentives or motivators. We're not bribing. But some people, some do feel comfortable. I did certainly, offering some spending money on vacation. If you guys can get along with each other for X amount of minutes, then I'm going to give you these points, and I'll explain what I'm talking about in a little bit. And then I'll give you some money for those points, and then you can buy things at the gift shop. But I'm just not going to, listen to you guys fight the entire way to the zoo and while we're at the zoo. And then when we're forced to walk through the gift shop at the end of the zoo, I'm not going to buy you that gigantic octopus. Because you've been fighting the whole time. And that feels a little bit of a rub sometimes for families who want to have a fun time on vacation and you want to do something nice for your kids, but you don't want to reward the bad behavior. So I'll give you some structure for how to do that. Also, just remember that another way that we can reward kids is by letting them get out of things that are unpleasant or simply not fun. Now, this comes up more often when kids engage in negative behavior, and that gets them out of something that they don't want. So we're in the museum. I don't want to be in the museum. I hate the museum. I have a tantrum, and we leave. And then we go to the zoo, which is where I really wanted to go all along. So just be really careful when you're on vacation, trying to make everybody happy, that you're not accidentally reinforcing really negative behaviors by doing fun things because a child engaged in negative behavior to get out of the thing that they didn't want to do. Now, the other flip side of that, people will do the things that they get rewarded for, and people won't do things that they experience negative consequences for. So negative consequences are things that I don't like that are happening now, or losing out on activities that are fun. So, if I'm engaging in some negative behaviors at the zoo, but the zoo is really where I wanted to go, and I need to, go sit at the snack bar for 5 minutes so I can, calm down and get myself under control, that's going to feel like a negative consequence because I'm missing out on seeing the elephants, right? And by the way, that would be a really good way to consequence some negative behavior. So one of the things is really important to remember. We always say that kids try to do their best. They're doing the best that they can. I like to say also that kids are just trying to get what they want. And this is in their nature. That's what they're supposed to do. Figure out how the world works. So they're going to try all kinds of different behaviors to get what they want. Now, when you're on vacation, what do they want? Well, really, anytime. What do they want? They want to have fun. They want to have a good time. But sometimes they get in their own way and they sabotage themselves or the family. And when that happens, it's important for us to remember that they do want to have a good time. They don't want to be miserable. And we need to show them the way to turn that corner and get themselves back on a positive path. So we're going to use our understanding of behavior to set some realistic expectations. We're not going to expect everyone to be happy all the time. We're going to plan for the worst. We're going to hope for the best. And we're going to be proactive in our planning. And you're going to, I'm going to say that word maybe 15 more times. And Cheryl said it probably 15 times. So I apologize for that. But really, I think the recipe for success in a family vacation is to be thinking ahead of time for the possibilities. And the more that you can do that, but then also be flexible in the moment, the more successful your vacation is going to be. So consider using incentives to inspire positive behavior, but also plan for consequences for negative behavior when it comes up, because you know it's going to, right? Don't expect appreciation or thank yous. We got to set our expectations appropriately. Your kids are probably not going to thank you for what a great vacation it is that you've planned. They might in 10 years. Now, if you have a really sweet, lovely child, which many of you do, in fact, all of you do, but some especially socially savvy kids know that saying to you, thank you for doing nice things is a really wonderful thing to do. And so some kids do. My kids didn't. They do now, oddly enough. They remember now the fun things, whereas, you know, in the moment, I was like, oh, this is the worst vacation ever. We're never going to have any positive memories about this at all, but they do. I don't really know how that happened exactly. But if you do get those thank yous and that appreciation, use some behavior-specific praise. Say, thank you for saying thank you. That really makes me feel like all the time that I spent trying to make this vacation awesome for you is appreciated. So take those opportunities to feed that back and build positive energy. And for your kids, help them set appropriate expectations by developing your rules for vacation. Here's a secret that is really helpful to remember. Kids seem to think that when you move from one environment or setting into another, that the rules suddenly don't apply anymore. And then when you come back home, the rules that were in place before you went on vacation also don't apply anymore. Now, this is very, you know, beneficial to their perspectives, because if it's a blank slate, then they can rewrite the rules every time, and they're going to try to. So a very helpful tip is review the rules ahead of time. So before you go on vacation, review your rules on vacation. And you may have some very specific vacation rules. So for example, you might decide you're going to have a family meeting and discuss what the vacation rules are. And here's some possibilities. Everyone must pee at bathroom breaks. I strongly recommend that if you have any children in your family who don't have wise bladders, that you make this a rule. So we found this out when we went to Disney World for the first time with my daughter, and she was probably 4, maybe 5. So potty training was not in the distant past. She had been potty trained, but she wasn't really great at being attuned to her body signals. And so inevitably what would happen is we would pass a bathroom and I would say, usually me, does anybody have to go to the bathroom? Zoe, do you have to go to the bathroom? There's a bathroom right there. And she'd be like, nope, don't have to go. And then 5 minutes later, we're in line for Magic Mountain, or 20 minutes later, worse, we're in line for Magic Mountain, because that's a very long line and you have to stay in line for a really long time. And suddenly she desperately has to pee, and she's crossing her legs and she's doing the pee dance, and she would have tantrums when she had to pee. Like she would start crying really loud and like, oh, you know, I mean, it was a horrible scene. So obviously we would need to leave and go find a bathroom. And she was always worried about wetting her pants, and it was horrible. So we developed a rule. Everyone must pee, and try to pee anyway at bathroom breaks. Another few good rules. sit in your assigned seat. You may really want to have assigned seats in the car if you're going to be traveling in a car. If there's a preferred seat that everyone wants to sit in, then develop a system for everyone to take turns, but think about it ahead of time, because otherwise this is tantrum material. We're planning ahead. Stay within line of eyes and ears. So this is a really important rule, obviously, whenever you're going out in public with young children, or even older children who might be impulsive and tend to get lost, you have to stay within line of sight and ears. I need to be able to hear you and see you, so I don't have to worry that you're going to get lost. Eat a healthy meal before desserts. That might be a rule that you choose to have on vacation. You're eating out a lot. There's the opportunity for dessert every single time a menu is placed in front of you. So you might want to think ahead of time about whether you're going to allow dessert or not, and under what conditions. Otherwise, it might become this big old fight and a meltdown. Because remember, whatever your usual routine is at home, suddenly that's all fallen to the wayside, and this is a brand new world. Kids think that we can make up new rules. So a final thing on this list, don't yuck someone else's yum, right? What that basically means is no complaining. We're not going to complain about going to the museum. We're not going to complain about what we're having for dinner or where we're going for dinner. Now, kids will complain about those things, but if you set the expectation that if we're all going to have a good time, that we don't do complaining about those things, just for this week that we're on vacation, it might be easier for them to sort of follow that expectation because they also want to have a really good time. Easier for them to do on a vacation, a discrete week of time, than it is just every single day of their normal lives at home. So this is one of the things that Cheryl was talking a lot about, which is predicting when negative behavior will occur and then taking action to prevent that from happening. And this is a lot in the planning. So make sure that you're scheduling fun stuff interspersed with the boring stuff. Do the boring stuff first and then do the fun stuff. Make sure you're meeting basic needs by feeding kids at regular times, ensuring they go to the bathroom, getting downtime, making sure they go to bed at a reasonable hour. Close to their regular bedtime is a really good idea to keep those routines in place, because if you are going to bed at 9 or 9:30 and they're used to going to bed at 7:30, you're going to have some cranky kids. And vacation is an easy time to sort of let it slide by and let bedtime get later, because, you know, kids want to stay up and we're all having a good time, but may not be the best idea, especially for kids who are very sensitive to needing all of their sleep at night. And we know that kids are going to have conflict with each other. Siblings are going to fight. What are they going to fight about? They're going to fight about getting the best thing or being able to go first. So if you can sort of think ahead of time, what are the things that my kids are going to fight about, and determine a method for who's going to sit in that seat when, who's going to get to choose the restaurant, those sorts of things, planning ahead of time. And then you don't have to think in the moment. The problem with thinking in the moment, as all of you know, is that when the pressure is on and kids are fighting or they're pleading for something, it's very difficult to think. This was my whole sort of purpose as a parent. It's sort of why I became a therapist, because I found it so difficult in the moment to make really good decisions about what to allow my children to do or not do. So I began to create a lot more structure in my parenting approach. Because when you think ahead of time about how you're going to solve that problem, it's just so much easier. And then you say, this is how we're going to solve the problem, and boom, you're all set. I would
Hey,
also
Teri, it's Irene. Real quick, one of the questions in the chat is, how do you sort of make these adjustments for teenagers? Because some of these things could be for teenagers, but they could also be a little bit more for the younger kids on vacation. So any nuances that you want to mention for teenagers?
Well, we shall talk
Teenage
about that when we're talking about incentives, for sure. But I mean, teenagers need sleep too, and they also need downtime, and they, I mean, bathroom breaks, they're probably better at that than my 5-year-old daughter was. But even food, like my 54-year-old husband didn't eat lunch or breakfast the other day, and he was doing hard labor, and I knew he was going to get cranky, and I'm like, do you want to eat something? And he's like, no. I said, I'm just going to make you grilled cheese. Teenagers are not always going to be in tune with those things, especially if you're a teenager who tends to get really excited about things and distracted about things, and you're not really attending to your bodily needs. So I would say that those things do apply to teenagers as well, although your approach to them might be a little bit different, but you can structure your time. So make sure you get back to the hotel room in time for everybody to go to bed. Make sure that you structure downtime within your schedule. Sibling conflict for teenagers, if you've already decided ahead of time, maybe you do it with them and you have a conversation. This is how we're going to figure out who gets to sit in the front seat when, right? Which legs. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to tailor things for teenagers versus younger kids a little bit later. And if I forget, Irene, feel free to let me know. Okay. All right. The other thing that I would recommend on vacation is something that is called special time, and that's one-on-one time with your child. So if you have 2 parents and you have more than one child, or even if you only have one child, creating opportunities for you to do one-on-one activities can be really, really special. And is a way of sort of filling their bucket with your individual attention. It can really cut down on the sibling conflict that happens, which is often about trying to get your attention when you're all together. And then finally, when negative behavior will occur, well, sometimes kids just get into a rut, right? And you can just see them tanking and going down that negative spiral into that negative place. And you might be tempted to start, consequences, but you know where that goes. Then suddenly tomorrow you're booking a flight to go home early from your vacation because your child has now lost all of the rest of vacation time, which, by the way, you're not going to do anyway. So it's really helpful to think about in those moments when kids or teenagers are having meltdowns, that this is just a moment, and thinking about how we can give them a path forward. How, if they've lost some privileges, how can we let them regain those privileges, right? And how can they, if they've lost the opportunity for going out to ice cream today, how can we help them realize there'll be other opportunities for going out for ice cream? Maybe we talk about doing it tomorrow. Right? If you're denying them one thing that they want right now, an octopus in the gift shop, then maybe we talk about how they can get something that they want at another gift shop at the next, museum that you're going to. So give them the path forward, identify for them how they can get what they want without giving into negative behavior and reinforcing that behavior in the moment. So just some ideas for predicting negative behavior and when it will occur and what are the things that you can do. Boredom is probably one of the biggest culprits that's going to contribute to negative behavior. I do a lot of evaluations of students, and students with ADHD, particularly, well, at all ages. I was going to say particularly the teenagers, but this does happen with the younger kids too, is when they're disengaged and tuned out, they like to say that it's boring. And it may not be that it's boring. It may be that it's hard to sit down and pay attention to something that you're not really all that interested in. It's certainly hard to sit in a car and like get along with your siblings when you're not sure what to do. And so many kids with ADHD don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know how to select an activity to keep them busy. Now, if you have electronics and your kids are into electronics and you feel like allowing electronics, then, their cell phone or a Switch or watching movies or whatever, well, game on, feel free. We do have, you know, these recommendations for screen time by the American Association of Pediatrics, right? But I would say that those rules are out the window when it comes to vacation. Feel free to let your kids use electronics, especially when you're in the car during travel times, or other times that are kind of boring, right? Hanging out in the room, in the car, standing in line. Those are prime times for kids to fight and to get into conflict with each other. So here are just some ideas of things that you can do during those times. And here's an awesome thought. You could, number one, when they say, I don't know what to do, you could have a little list, a little box or a little list of things that you can do in the car, hanging out in the hotel room, standing in line, prepared so that they can pick something from that list. And because they never can figure out what to do for themselves. So you can provide them with options, but don't tell them what to do because then they won't want to do it, right? So if they choose an activity and they're able to engage in that activity for 30 minutes without, you know, getting into fights and without interrupting you, you can actually set a timer and say, if you can do this for 30 minutes, then I will give you some sort of privilege. I will give you some sort of reward. So maybe I don't want you doing electronics the entire time that we're hanging out in the hotel. So if you spend 30 minutes doing one of these other things, you know, not electronics, obviously. Do some exercise. You can do sit-ups and push-ups and planks. Do tic-tac-toe, play hangman together, do a word search, read a book for half an hour. I will let you have half an hour of electronics. Just as simple as that. So the power of rewards. Obviously, I'm a behavior therapist, so this is what I do. This is my bread and butter. But you don't have to have like a really structured reward system. You could just offer rewards kind of like along the way. And here are some ways to do that. And then also we'll talk about a reward system in case you want to do that while you're on vacation. So one of the things that I used to do with my kids, because my kids fought all the time, and we, did we ever go on a plane? I'm not sure that we ever did, because our vacations were very low budget. We didn't have a lot of money to spend. So we spent a lot of time driving in the car. And so my kids would fight all the time. And so I would say, okay, you guys, I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. If y'all can get along, that means I'm not hearing yelling or complaining about anybody happening in that back seat. Then I'll give you each a Skittle. 1 Skittle. So what does that mean? That means for an hour of driving, you've given 4 Skittles. 4 hours of driving, you can do the math, is 16 Skittles. That's not very high of a price to pay in sugar for having a peaceful ride. It doesn't have to be Skittles, obviously. It doesn't have to be candy. It could be Cheez-Its, it could be fruit cubes, it could be, you know, whatever desirable snack your kids like and that you can feel good about giving them. I was okay with Skittles if I was only doling out 1 every 15 minutes. You can also do first then scheduling, like we go to the museum and then we go to the pool, but making it contingent on behavior. So when you're offering rewards, it's always important to ensure that that reward is contingent on behavior. So first we're going to the museum, and for every 15 minutes that you can follow the vacation rules, which might include not arguing with your sibling, right? You can earn 5 minutes at the hotel pool. And I mean, this can apply to all ages. Unless you have a 16 or a 17-year-old, I don't know that you're going to be that restrictive with their time, but maybe they can earn the privilege to go off on their own and do whatever they want, right? Maybe they're accruing the amount of time that they can be hanging out in the room by themselves, or that they can go explore the hotel by themselves, right? So the first then scheduling contingent on behavior, I would highly recommend that you be really clear about that you have to have your vacation rules identified ahead of time, including things like you know, getting along with your siblings, which I didn't put on that list because, you know, presumably that might be a rule we have all the time. Finally, you can award points for positive behavior with a planned sort of cash in for getting rewards. Now, this would be a more traditional kind of point system. And basically it works like this. You get a point for positive behavior, you lose a point for negative behavior, and then we've planned at some point during the day that you can cash in your points for rewards. And here's a little list of possible rewards. They could earn money, so it might be 50 cents per point, something like that. It could be dessert or sweet treats, depending upon your preferences. If you're not into that, you certainly don't have to offer that. Could be preferred activities like pool time, electronics, watching a movie, either in the hotel room, or you could go out to a movie on a vacation if you wanted to, or letting the child pick an outing that they're really interested in going to while you're out on vacation in whatever location that you're doing your vacation in. They could choose the restaurant. You could have a prize box kind of thing for younger kids. It's really, there are loads of options. All kids are rewarded by something. It's just sometimes a matter of figuring out what they're rewarded by and then using
Hey,
them.
Terry, there's some questions.
Yes.
So it sounds like a lot of this so I'm just reading some of the questions. It sounds like a lot of this in an adult setting, a reasonable expectation in controlling their own emotional responses, because it's so easy as a parent to, you know, have your buttons pushed and react. So a lot of this is how the parent reacts versus how the kid reacts, right? Because some of this you can't totally control with your kid, and you're not going to give Skittles to a high school kid or some other, you know, minimal reward to an older kid.
Certainly, yeah. Although, you know, if you're talking about car time for an older kid, if you have access to their Wi-Fi, you can say you need to get along with your sibling, and if you don't, you know, I'll give you like 3 strikes and you're out, and then you're going to lose the privilege. I'll either take your phone or I'll shut off your Wi-Fi. So when kids get a little bit older, these kinds of systems, reward systems, tend to shift a little bit from I'm cashing in points to get a reward to I have some privileges and my privileges are going to be revoked if I don't follow the expectations. So there's a little bit of a shift that happens there with teenagers. And you're absolutely right in that parents need to set the tone. You know, how we react in these, we need to predict that our kids are not going to behave themselves. And if we can sort of stay calm, because we know this, we knew this was going to happen. We planned for it. We know what we're going to do for consequences. It makes it so much easier to like keep your cool and just do the thing that you planned to do. So we do need to talk about consequences, right? But let's talk for just a moment about some of the ways that kids could earn points if you wanted to do a vacation-based point
But if
system.
that's not something that you do at home normally, you're not going to necessarily implement a points strategy.
Why not, Irene?
I don't know. I'm just asking. I mean, one of
Of
the questions
course
is
you
any
could.
advice for the teen that completely shuts down and they don't want to leave the hotel? I mean, you're not going to
Can
give them points.
you hang on to that question and remind me at the end?
Okay.
Okay, because we still have a few slides to get through here. And for those parents who want to know more about point systems that are age appropriate for their children, let's do those, and then we can totally answer those questions.
Well, and there is one more question, and you can table this. We can talk about this at the end. It's an important question, though. But really, the kind of the net of it is there a week-long overnight camp that you could consider sending, like one of your children, you know, with ADHD, you know, that at that point, like if they make it really difficult for the rest of the family, is there a camp or something that you can do to help?
Meaning like, okay, so can you do me a favor? And while I'm going through these other slides, if you can communicate with that person and ask, are we talking about sort of a therapeutic camp, like a wilderness camp that might teach that kid some skills? Or are we talking about a vacation for that kid that is separate from the family vacation?
So I
if
think
you
maybe maybe we can just get to that at the end. Okay, that's fair. Okay.
sounds okay. So back to a point system if you want to do that. And yes, you can totally implement a point system on vacation, even if you don't have one at home. I had a point system at home because I needed to for my sanity. And that's, of course, why I do what I do. But on vacation, there are loads of opportunities to give kids rewards. So let's just reflect for a moment. Remember reward options. On vacation, kids are very motivated to have spending money because you're going places where they can spend money and they're going to appreciate that. You're also going to be going to a lot of restaurants. So having the choice of going to a restaurant, having the choice of having dessert, those are certainly things that are more available on vacation than they might be when you're at home. And preferred activities like pool time. If you don't have a pool, but the hotel has a pool, it's a great reward that you can offer for positive behavior during the day. And they might always just be motivated to use their electronics. And so we can use that as well, particularly if you don't want them on their electronics the entire time that you're on vacation. Then this might be a time that you're going to choose to limit them and make that something that they have to earn. And you can certainly offer it, for free during downtimes if you want to do that too. But figure out ahead of time what you want your rules to be. Make sure you and your partner are on the same page about that. I remember when we were doing our road trip out west, the landscape is very, very different. We grew up in my family, raised our family in New England. And my husband really wanted the kids to look out the window and appreciate the scenery. But I was, sort of like, you can't force them to look out the window and enjoy the scenery. So we were coming from very different places about, I thought it might be okay for them to use their electronics, and he just didn't want to allow it at all. Whereas I saw that as a scenario for disaster and them fighting constantly. So, talk about it with your partner. Make sure you guys have agreement on those kinds of things. So if you want to do a point system that is specific to vacation, now you can also do one at home at any time if you want to. But if you wanted to do one that's specific to vacation, one of the things that you need to do is identify the ways the kids can earn points. And we have to be really specific about that. So get along with your sibling for 30 minutes and you can have 2 points or 1 point or whatever. Let your sister go first. Accept no without arguing or complaining, because I am going to say no sometimes. Entertain yourself for 30 minutes. Express a positive attitude about something you really don't think you're going to like. Like, you didn't want to go to the museum, but say, I'm looking forward to learning something at the museum, Dad. Like, even if it's a little bit fake, not sarcastic, but a little bit, put on, that's okay. Because, one of the things that we know in life is we fake it until we make it. And that can actually be a really positive skill. Walk on your own without arguing and complaining, and don't make me carry you, or carry your own backpack. And honestly, that can apply to teenagers too, because they don't want to carry their stuff either. And you don't want to be the one to carry it for them. Now, when big feelings do happen, here's a recipe for managing it. Number 1, you knew this was going to happen. So don't be surprised and don't be upset. Number 2, try to validate their feelings. If their feelings are reasonable, okay? If your son is having a tantrum because he doesn't get to wear his favorite sweatpants for the 5th day in a row because they need to be washed, that's not necessarily, actually, that is kind of reasonable. There might be unreasonable things. I think of other examples at home, but I'm having a hard time at, maybe it's, you don't get to choose where we're going to dinner tonight because you chose last night. That is not reasonable. It's your sister's turn. It's not reasonable for you to have a tantrum about that. I'm not sure that I would give a lot of attention to that. But, if your favorite sweatpants are dirty and you just love them, you can say, I know that you love your favorite sweatpants and I'm so sorry that they're dirty. Validate their feelings. I understand how you feel. Of course you feel sad and uncomfortable having to wear a pair of pants that are not your favorite, but you can't wear these dirty ones. And so we have to solve that problem. And how do you want to solve it? right? Attunement is this skill that we've had, most of us as parents have had since our babies were very, very little. And that is when you have this crying, screaming baby, we do not cry and scream in response, right? What do? We hold the baby and we talk quietly and we rock and we might sing and we might do some patting. And it's our very attitude that sort of, I'm calm and cool and collected and I got this, I got you, I'm maintaining safety here and I'm not going to rise to your level of panic. That helps them calm down. That works, not extremely quickly and not miraculously, but it does work. There's a component of that that's really important for all ages of your child. You know, I remember when my daughter was 16, and I don't remember what happened, some sort of crisis in her bedroom, and she came running into my bedroom and she threw herself in my arms, sobbing and crying. And I just, you know, I was patting and I was rocking and I was saying, it'll be okay, you know, and she calmed down. So remember that you have the power to do that. And when you get frustrated and you react in kind to a tantrum, you're not making that situation better. Now that's hard to remember, it's hard to do, but it's important. It's also important to understand kids' behaviors, but not excuse them. So I understand that you're hungry because we didn't eat lunch at the regular time. It had to be postponed for whatever reason it was. And you're starving and you're hangry and this behavior is because of that. But I'm not going to excuse your behavior because you're hungry. You want to know why? Because sometimes people are hungry and that doesn't give you an excuse for being nasty to everybody else or for hitting people or for screaming and crying and refusing to do things. And then finally, reflect and learn. And Cheryl talked a little bit about that too, but think afterwards, like, what could I have done differently? And often that's in the planning. And if it's not about the planning, it's in how you responded. So I would recommend that before you go on vacation, you talk about what are the consequences that you're going to be implementing for negative behavior, because the temptation is to just not give consequences at all so that everybody can have a great time. But the problem with that, they're talking about behavior, is that if you don't give a consequence for negative behavior, that negative behavior might very likely tend to occur at an even higher rate of frequency on vacation than it does at home, because they know that they're not going to be consequenced. So figure it out ahead of time. Don't threaten to cancel things that you aren't prepared to cancel. That's a very bad idea. They will figure out very, very quickly that they don't need to believe anything that you say about consequences. And then when you actually do implement a consequence that you said you were going to, they might get incrementally more, upset about that. I would recommend that you remove the child from an activity for a brief required period of time, 2 to 5 minutes. I would say, 30 seconds for every year of child age is probably a good estimate. Require them to be calm and quiet for a certain period of time, either for the whole 2 to 5 minutes or just, for a minute, whatever you judge makes sense for you and your family. I like to be really structured, so I would say your timeout is 2 minutes, and that's what we're going to do. You're going to be quiet and calm and sit right there with your butt in the seat of the chair for 2 minutes. Whether that is a park bench or a spot that I identified on the floor in the hotel room, or in a spot that I identified in the lounge area or right outside of the restaurant or in the car. So those are all options for ways you can get your kid to take a timeout. And timeout is not a dirty word. Timeout is a very effective strategy. But if you don't like to call it timeout, you can just call it a break. Get a break, calm down, and then we'll return. The other thing that you might do is have delayed participation in the next fun activity. So show me that you can get along with your brother for 15 minutes and then you can, join in the fun with us. Show me that you can sit quietly and calmly for 2 minutes and then we can go back into the restaurant. Or if the behavior happened maybe in the car on the way to the trampoline park or wherever it is that you're going, or the zoo. Spend 5 minutes in the car when you get there. Everybody else gets to go and we'll catch up with them, but that's your consequence for the negative behavior. So a delayed participation in the next fun activity is another way you can do consequences. But when you do, or you can do loss of privileges. So privileges include electronics, your cell phone, your switch, your, whatever. But I would always provide kids with a way back. How do you get those privileges back? How do you get back into the fun activity that they want to be engaged in? Quiet ride was something I used for my kids because, they were fighting all of the time. And quiet ride meant that you had to put your hands underneath your butt and your voice needed to be off. And if you violated either of those rules, we were going to pull over on the side of the road and we were going to do a timeout. And that's, stopping the car. Timeout just meant we're pulling over on the side of the road. I'm going to start the timer when you're quiet, and we're going to sit here for the total amount of minutes that the timeout lasts, and then we can get back on the road again. That was magical. Kids really, if they don't want to be in the car, which they often don't, it really drives them nuts that you're sitting on the side of the road, not even going anywhere, because they have to serve their time. And they learn very, very quickly how to calm themselves down, and so that you can get back on the road safely without people having tantrums and kicking your seat and throwing things and trying to hit you and all of that fun stuff. And teenagers, by the way, like they may not be trying to hit you or kick your seat, but they're screaming and they're yelling and they're just as rude as the young kids, sometimes even worse. So a few sort of takeaways. Let's use behavior theory for the power of good. So reinforce the positive with your attention. Be present in the moment. Share enjoyment and enthusiasm with your kids. Have those conversations about the best thing about today when we were on vacation. Keep a journal or record those wonderful moments. I wouldn't necessarily have kids do the writing for that. They hate writing often. So do the writing for them, but commemorate those wonderful moments and keep the attention and energy on the positive, and keep your tone low and calm for those negative moments. So now we can get to some questions, or if anybody has ideas that they want to share. Cheryl, thank you for coming back on. We're happy to talk about those things, whatever you were thinking about.
I would like to just.
Teri, one of the questions was after, and I guess Pam sent subsequent to that a Chad article on summer camps for kids with ADHD. But the question was, after there's a week-long overnight, are there any week-long overnight camps with kids with ADHD or ODD? At what point is it okay to send our very difficult child to a camp so that parents and other children can enjoy, hang on, somebody just put something else in there, can enjoy a vacation without them? All three of my children have ADHD, but one with ODD relentlessly tries to make everyone miserable, especially on vacation. So it's not fair for the other kids. So it's a hard thing for parents, but how do you, what would you say about that?
That's a really difficult one. I would be inclined to not. I would be inclined for the sake of family and togetherness, I would be very hesitant to take a vacation without one of the kids. Now, an exception might be if that child really wanted to go on some other vacation and it just so happened, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you would orchestrate that if you feel like that would benefit your family, that the rest of the family would go on vacation the same week. But I would really put a lot of thought into that. And chances are, if you have some kids with some really challenging behaviors, especially one with that level of severe challenging behavior, you have a therapist that you're working with, I would consult with your therapist and follow their advice on that.
I just want to chime in about separate vacations. Actually, what we did a couple of times is older daughter who loves exercise went to track camp or cross-country camp, whatever it was. She was going anyway, and the three of us planned a vacation specifically that week when she was going to her camp. So she didn't feel like she missed out on anything.
Mhm.
And there might be something like that you can coordinate. And I saw another question about the teenage boy who won't leave the hotel room. And this goes back to the original planning that you do before the vacation and finding something for everyone. Even a kid who doesn't like to participate, there might be something he wants to do. Does he love trains? Is there a train museum somewhere? Is there something he likes that he can pick out and, help plan the vacation? So a lot of times there is a way to get them to engage. If he's a teenager, can he stay alone for one of the days in the room with his electronics and agree to participate the other days? So I think there's a few options to try and involve the kids. That's my take.
So, and what I would, yeah, as always, my approach would be pretty structured. I would say, hey, dude, if you want to stay here in the hotel room and play on your electronics, then you have to at least go to breakfast with us, or something to that effect. And really, that's going to be a case-by-case, family-based sort of decision about what's the minimum expectation that you're going to put on that person to be part of the family and to enjoy this vacation. And it also does depend on age, but teenagers, if they're old enough to stay in the room and that's what they want to do, I wouldn't let that necessarily get in the way of your fun. If they can be trusted to stay in the room by themselves, and then also you can bring the fun to them. Maybe you order in and you do takeout in the hotel room, and they get to choose what you eat, and you can use that as a real bonding opportunity to do what they wanted to do, which is just, hang out in the hotel room. So I think that those kinds of questions are going to be pretty individualized to your family preferences and the two parents who are involved and what you want your minimum expectations to be, but also the age of your kid or teenager and what are the things that they're going to be doing while they're hanging out in the hotel room, presumably by themselves, and if they can be trusted, like so many different variables. And again, if you have a therapist that's involved in helping your family navigate these kinds of challenges, then that's a really good person to ask. And perhaps you have some decisions ahead of time about what things are going to look like when you're on vacation and what the expectations are. And that's kind of what this is all about, right? Is planning ahead of time. And obviously teenagers should be part of that plan. So you don't have any big surprises about what people want to do.
And Teri, there's one other comment from Leanne Lynch, and she said she's writing about our webinar for rockaround.com. So it's a blog site on travel, adventure, and life for neurodiverse families. And she also started a book series. So they seek to ease the literal and figurative rides for families. So she says she came out with Rocket Around DC storybook and companion activity book a few months ago, and the books can be enjoyed by all kinds of kids, but are specifically designed for neurodiverse kids. And then one of the questions she had was, she went to, yes, the recording, this lecture is being recorded, and there will be a link that she can share on her blog. She wanted to know if she could share it on her blog. And then any good resources that you would recommend for parents and families. So Pam, you had posted something, but are there any other resources that we could recommend?
Sort of perusing and Googling around, and there's numerous organizations that have camps for neurodiverse kids and teens. We had someone on our board a while back who is involved with Summit Camp. And that is a very big organization that does numerous traveling and camps in Pennsylvania and like around the entire world. Some of the kids go to Europe or China. They pretty exotic things, but also very basic things as well. And they really put their arms around the neurodiverse children that attend and the teens. It's a really good camp. There's a ton of other ones. SOAR, SOAR. We've had them at our ADHD awareness resource fair a few years ago prior to the pandemic, and they're very involved. In fact, the gentleman who's director is interviewed in that Chad article. It's a very kind of general things to consider when putting your child into a camp, but they don't particularly give specific names, but there are many, if you look them up, that are accredited, and there's lots of different options and price points for that.
Were there any other questions that we neglected to address? And I can't see the chat, so I can't.
I see the chat. I don't see any other questions. Do you, Irene?
No, the only thing is that Pam did post, in case any of you that are still on didn't see, in the chat, she has a link to Chad National, and there are articles there that guide you to finding good summer camps for kids.
Yeah,
So you know, if you haven't seen that in the chat, take a peek at that, because that would be helpful.
yeah, it's got a couple of little links to help sort that out. And yeah.
I just want to add one thing, as long as we're talking about summer. I highly recommend summer camps. They are really a great opportunity for kids to build social skills in a fun way rather than at school. And it takes some effort sometimes to find the right camp. And we sent our kids to some of the wrong camps for a while before we found one that was a super great match for them and that they went to like for 10 years. And they made friends for life at these camps. So it's really great for kids, and it's of course a break for the parents, but you're doing it mostly for the kids.
So Cheryl, do you want to put in a boost for that camp if they liked it that much?
No, I'm not going to, sorry.
And that was a long time ago. My kids also enjoyed going to camps, and we didn't have as many options because we were in Vermont, but the school always offered a camp. And while that seems a little mundane, they had a great time. They got to go to the pool just about every day, and they had arts and crafts, and yeah, so I agree. I think I would always, when I was scheduling summer, make sure that there were some fun camps in there. But as long as there's fun, but then there's also camps that can be fun and also helpful. There are a ton of camps that teach kids executive function skills, for example, or who really specialize in working with neurodiverse populations. And one of the things that I would really love parents to know more about are camps that prepare seniors for entering college. So you can do a camp. I think Landmark College in Putney, Vermont, which was actually very close to where we lived, they have one of those camps, and it's very renowned for teaching neurodiverse students how to manage college so that when they get there in the fall, they're ready and they have the skills to be more successful than they might have been if they, didn't get prepared that way. So that's another
And
thing.
it looks like Susan has a question for you. Susan, you can unmute yourself. Or I guess Pam, do you have to unmute Susan?
Don't think so, but let's do this.
She's muted, so.
All right.
And I'll just add that Jill's house in Northern Virginia is a wonderful place for parents to be able to take their kids sometimes for weekends when they just need a weekend break. It's part of, oh my gosh, what's that big Presbyterian church on Route 7? But it's Jill's house, and I know we work with a lot of families that have taken their kids there it's not a vacation like for a whole week, but it's great for a bit of a reprieve sometimes if your family needs it.
Susan, you're unmuted. We're interested in your question.
Sorry, I didn't have a question.
Oh,
Oh, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I messed that up. I will tell you that when I have a teenager who can certainly be difficult on trips. We just had that happen on an eclipse trip. But when she was young, I loved a place in Jamaica that was, as far as I'm concerned, the only vacation for myself as a single mom that I had with her when she was young, because of the way it was set up. So I'll mention it if you don't mind.
of course.
Sure.
It's called FDR, and every room comes with a nanny. And it sounds outrageously expensive, but it's really not. And people who had difficult children, because they advertise that they can certainly handle children with special needs, would hire an extra nanny so that there would be one for a child that needed more attention and one for the rest of the children in the family.
That sounds awesome.
So FDR.
If you could share that in the chat, that might really be
Sure.
helpful for people.
And I imagine if that exists in Jamaica, that probably exists in other locations as well. And I think that those vacations that have those special accommodations for kids, but also more specifically kids with special needs, can be just a lifesaver for family vacations for sure. Anything else? Wonderful. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Pam, to wrap things up and
Alrighty.
get us ended.
I want to thank Teri and Cheryl for providing all this very personal and direct information about vacations with children with who are neurodiverse. There's a plethora of information that's really, really appreciated, and it's been a really wonderful lecture. Thank you for your expertise and your personal experiences with your own children. To let everyone know that anyone who registered and attended this lecture will be getting the handouts, that the slides, as well as a link to the recording that will be provided. And it will be also found on our YouTube channel, which we have a lot of other lectures from past times that you can peruse and listen to those and watch those as well. So thank you so much for coming tonight, everyone. In May, we have another lecture coming up, and we were debating about what it was, but I'm sure.
I think it's called Navigating Family Life with ADHD or something to that effect, with Robin Brennan, who is a well-known therapist in the area.
Great.
Yeah. And so that's going to be on May 14th, the
Perfect.
second Tuesday of the month.
So that will be promoted fairly quickly. And we hope you'll join us for that lecture if that topic is of interest to you. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.